October 2025, Paris Fashion Week. A young Thai woman walks into the Dior show. Her name is Orm Kornapat. If you haven't heard of her, most Western audiences haven't. Here's the short version. She's a 23-year-old actress from Bangkok whose sapphic drama The Secret of Us became a Netflix sensation across Asia in 2024. She and her co-star Ling Ling are Thailand's most talked about screen pairing, and Dior signed them both as brand ambassadors just weeks before this show. Orm has roughly 2.4 million Instagram followers. She generates $23.5 million in something called earned media value, the industry's standard measure of what media exposure is worth, combining every like, share, repost, and mention into a single dollar figure. Her engagement rate, 117%. That number sounds impossible, so let me explain. It means the total interactions on her posts, likes, saves, shares, comments, fan reposts, exceed her follower count. Her audience doesn't just scroll, they amplify. Sitting across from her, Kylie Jenner, nearly 400 million followers, $10 million in media value, and an engagement rate of 0.4%. A woman with less than 1% of Jenner's audience generated more than double her economic impact. Now, Orm Kornapat is Thai, not Korean, and this is a show about Asia's culture economy, not just Korea's. What she represents is the second wave of a revolution that K-pop started. Korean idols wrote the playbook. Thai and Southeast Asian stars are now running it. And the luxury houses that once looked only to Hollywood are placing their biggest bets on performers most Western audiences have never heard of. Today, I want to show you how that playbook was built and what it means when an entire industry rewires its economics around organized fandom. We'll follow the money from Bangkok to Seoul to Paris. And this is Soft Power Asia. I'm Sims Lukwald, and this is how Asia's culture economy really works.
Welcome to Soft Power Asia. Icons, idols, and influence. Let's decode Asia's culture economy together.
This podcast is about the business behind Asia's cultural exports, the money, the strategy, the power structures that turn pop culture into economic infrastructure. If you listened to episode 1, you heard what happens when BTS announced their new tour. Today, we move from music to luxury. And I'm going to show you how a handful of Korean pop stars became the most valuable marketing assets the luxury industry has ever measured. Last episode, I promised you the story of the $227 million face. And I'm going to give you that story, of course, but then I'm going to show you a number that makes even 227 million look modest, generated by an ambassador who never attended a single fashion show. Act 1. The Blueprint. To understand how Orm Kornapat ended up outperforming Kylie Jenner, you have to go back to the group that built the template. And that group is BLACKPINK, the biggest girl group from Korea in the world. When BLACKPINK arrived at Paris Fashion Week, they didn't arrive together. Jisoo sat front row at Dior, Rosé at Saint Laurent, Jennie at Chanel, Lisa at Celine. 4 members across 4 of the most powerful luxury houses in Europe and not a single overlap between them. That wasn't luck, of course. Their stylist and image director, Un, told System magazine that her biggest goal had been to place one major luxury brand per member. Maximum surface area, 0 competition within the group. Here's what that strategy produced. Jisoo signed with Dior in 2021, then added Cartier and Tommy Hilfiger. By 2024, Lefty Analytics ranked her the #1 fashion influencer in the world. $227 million in earned media value across all her partnerships, more visibility than most luxury houses achieve through their entire annual marketing spend. And for Cartier specifically, the concentration was staggering. Jisoo alone generated 45% of the brand's total media value. Nearly half of everything Cartier was seen for worldwide came from a single face. Rosé took Saint Laurent, becoming the brand's first global ambassador in 59 years. In 2024, she ranked second globally at 196 million in EMV. Her jump coinciding with the solo breakthrough single with Bruno Mars, which peaked at number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. Every brand partnership in her portfolio multiplied alongside her chart success. Jenny went to Chanel, reportedly one of the last muses handpicked by Karl Lagerfeld before his death. She became the most followed Korean national on Instagram with 89 million followers. When Chanel puts that kind of weight behind a single face, it tells you something about where the brand sees its future customers. Lisa signed with Celine under Hedi Slimane, generating 39% of all media value across an entire menswear fashion week season from a single appearance. When she moved to Louis Vuitton in 2024, it wasn't treated as a loss by the industry, it was treated as a reallocation. Ambassador musical chairs at the highest level where the talent circulates between houses because the demand for Asian faces exceeds the supply of contracts. And then, in February 2026, all four returned together. BLACKPINK's Deadline mini album, their first group project in over 3 years, dropped alongside a 33-show world tour, with their 10th anniversary approaching this August. Days later, Rosé was front row at Saint Laurent in Paris, Jisoo at Dior. The system they built kept running even when the group wasn't releasing music because the luxury houses kept booking their front row seats regardless. What Ji-eun designed was more than a talent strategy. Think of it the way a portfolio manager would. Diversified across luxury houses, hedged against any single brand's creative fortunes, and compounding over time. Combined annual EMV approaching $500 million. And every K-pop act since has been trying to replicate the structure. Before 2016, the language of global ambassador barely existed in K-pop. That year, G-Dragon signed with Chanel, the first time K-pop formed a relationship with European luxury on a meaningful level. Ji-eun told System magazine such language around being an ambassador didn't even exist before him. And I myself remember the conversations in European boardrooms at the time, the polite skepticism, the assumption that Asian markets would buy luxury because of European mystique, not because of Korean performers. Within 8 years, that conventional wisdom has been obliterated. The K-pop ambassador isn't a niche experiment anymore. It's the dominant growth strategy for the most prestigious brands in the world. Act 2. The Ghost. Now, we spent all of episode 1 on BTS, the economics of the biggest comeback in pop music history. I won't repeat that story, but one data point from the luxury world is too extraordinary to pass over. In 2023, BTS's V, also known as Kim Taehyung, signed with Celine as a global ambassador. He was approaching military enlistment. The brand knew he would vanish for 18 months, and they signed him anyway. Through 31 Instagram posts and stories, without attending a single fashion week, without a public appearance, V generated $274 million in earned media value for Celine. More than Jisoo's total across 4 brands from one platform while approaching military service. When V returned to Paris Fashion Week in October 2025, the confirmation was immediate. 2 Instagram posts, $13.1 million in EMV, roughly 3/4 of all Celine mentions on social media that season. The year before, while V was in uniform, Celine hadn't made Lefty's top 10 brands at Paris Fashion Week at all. With him back, they were top 10 globally. Every luxury house that signed a BTS member during the enlistment period had made the same calculation, that the fandom's engagement would survive the ambassador's absence. And they were right. The brands had prepared campaign shoots scheduled months in advance, content banked for staggered release, social media teams maintaining a digital presence through archival material. When all 7 members completed service between June 2024 and June 2025, 5 returned to Fashion Week front rows simultaneously across New York, Milan, and Paris, generating a collective $39 million in EMV in a single season. Jin alone accounted for 37% of all social media mentions at Milan Fashion Week, with his Instagram comments disabled. The return validated every assumption the brands had made during the hiatus. Now, the real insight isn't about BTS specifically. It's about what the military period proved as a business model. If the fandom is engaged enough, physical presence becomes optional. That upends the entire logic of luxury marketing, an industry built on the assumption that you need a person in a room wearing the product being photographed by the right people. V's Celine deal compressed the old cycle. Celebrity attends show, photographers capture the moment, editors publish weeks later into one Instagram post from a phone. And it produced more value than most houses see from an entire season of front row appearances. If a digital-only ambassador can outperform a physical present one, then the logistics of Fashion Week become a cost center, not a value driver. The brands haven't fully absorbed this yet, but the data is there, waiting for someone to act on it. The digital-only ambassador isn't the workaround, it may be the future. Act 3. The pipeline. BTS and BLACKPINK built the model. The 4th generation of K-pop stars scaled it into something more like industrial infrastructure. Consider Stray Kids, for example. 7 of their 8 members now hold individual fashion brand ambassadorships, spanning 9 houses from Louis Vuitton to Versace to Gucci, plus a group deal with Tommy Hilfiger. They were the first full K-pop group to attend the Met Gala, not as guests, as the face of the brand that dressed them. Felix's numbers illustrate the scale. At Paris Fashion Week last October, he generated $10.8 million in EMV for Louis Vuitton, over a fifth of the brand's total. One member of one group generating a fifth of the media visibility for the world's biggest luxury brand. The K-pop boy group ENHYPEN signed with Prada as a full group in 2023 and topped the influencer rankings at Milan Fashion Week in September 2025. $18.3 million in media value, ahead of every other name at that event. Karina from the K-pop girl group aespa generated $14 million in EMV at a single Prada show, 44% of the brand's entire Fashion Week value. She has since added a Nike global ambassadorship extending into sportswear. Ives Wonjong has accumulated roughly 20 brand ambassadorships and 3 billion mentions on Xiaohongshu, China's equivalent of Instagram, more than any BLACKPINK member on the Chinese platform. The pattern across all of these is the same: a single idol generating a disproportionate share of an entire luxury brand's media visibility. Not 5%, not 10, we're talking 40, 50, 70% from one person's social media presence alone. That kind of concentration would make any CFO nervous in a different context. In luxury, it becomes the business model. The acceleration is measurable. When G-Dragon signed with Chanel in 2016, it was singular. By 2023, more than 30 new K-pop luxury ambassadorships were signed in a single year. Louis Vuitton alone closed 5 deals with K-pop acts, nearly half of all of its new global ambassador contracts. And the timeline from debut to luxury deal has collapsed. Rise signed with Louis Vuitton 98 days after their debut, before the group had even released a second single. Now, in the old model, artists spent years building credibility before luxury houses noticed. In the new model, brands are locking in talent on potential alone, the way venture capital bets on pre-revenue startups. And the phenomenon has spread well beyond Korea, which brings us back to where this episode started. The Thai influencer wave that opened this episode is part of the same structural shift. Orm Kornapal Hot and Ling Ling generated roughly $45 million in combined earned media value for Dior at that single Paris Fashion Week, approximately half of the brand's total. Win Meta Win at Prada, Meile Pak Pum at Dior. Southeast Asian faces are now competing for the same front row seats that K-pop artists locked down 5 years ago. The luxury houses aren't just diversifying their ambassador rosters, they are diversifying their risk. If one market's talent pipeline hits a snag, another market's is accelerating. What started as a Korean innovation has become a pan-Asian restructuring of the luxury influence economy. Act 4. The breaks. The system is efficient. The deals are lucrative. The engagement rates are unlike anything the luxury industry has seen before. But there are two cautionary tales that belong in this story. The first is sitting in Kering's annual report. Kering, the French conglomerate behind Gucci, Saint Laurent, Balenciaga, and Bottega Veneta, has had K-pop ambassadors for years. Gucci signed Kai from EXO in 2019. His capsule collection sold out on launch day. BTS's Sugar was at Valentino. And in 2025, Kering posted a net loss. Revenue fell 13%. The group's operating income dropped a third. The creative director at Gucci was replaced by Demna. And here's the telling detail. When Demna Gvasalia showed his first Gucci collection in Milan in late February, the front row was designed to signal a complete reset. Alessandro Michele was in the audience, Donatella Versace, and right next to them, Lee Nu from Stray Kids, Gucci's Korean ambassador. Even in a creative revolution, the K-pop relationship was the one thing the new regime kept intact. That tells you what Kering thinks it got wrong and what it believes it still has right. But ambassadors didn't save Gucci from 2 years of creative drift, because ambassadors can't rescue a product problem. K-pop EMV is a multiplier, not a substitute. When the creative direction works, the ambassador effect is exponential. At Dior, Jisoo's appointment helped Korean sales nearly double, according to System magazine, with Gen MZ purchases quadrupling. The ambassador creates attention, the product converts attention into purchases. Both sides of the equation have to hold. When the creative direction fails, no amount of fandom engagement can paper over the gap. Kai's fans bought the capsule collection, but they couldn't sustain demand for a brand whose broader aesthetic had lost its way. That's the lesson Kering learned at a cost of roughly €1 billion in lost operating income over 2 years. And it's a lesson worth remembering as the industry becomes more dependent on the K-pop pipeline. The ambassador is the accelerant, but the product is the fuel. Without the fuel, the accelerant has nothing to work with. The second cautionary tale is about corporate governance, and it's still unfolding. NewJeans was, in 2023, arguably the most commercially valuable girl group in K-pop's luxury ecosystem. 5 members holding 8 luxury partnerships across Chanel, Dior, Gucci, Burberry, Celine, and Louis Vuitton, generating roughly $80 million in revenue for their label. Then a dispute erupted between the label's CEO and parent company Hybe. The details are complex and still being adjudicated, but the consequences for luxury brands were immediate. A court injunction barred the members from commercial activity for months. Every luxury deal sat frozen. No brand made a public statement. Chanel quietly removed its ambassadors' photos from the Korean website. No press release, no explanation. That silence is worth understanding. In the luxury world, any public statement, dropping an ambassador or retaining one, becomes a position in a corporate war the brand never asked to join. So they usually say nothing. But saying nothing has its own cost. Months of paid-for ambassador visibility simply vanishing, campaign content that can't be published, and a generation of fans watching closely to see which brands stand by their idols and which don't. As of late March 2026, the legal battles are intensifying. Adore, the Hybe subsidiary that manages NewJeans, has filed a 43 billion won damages lawsuit, roughly $29 million, against member Danielle, with the first hearing held on March 26th and the next set for May. And the structural lesson is clear: K-pop ambassador deals exist within a corporate system where the artist doesn't control the relationship. The label negotiates. The parent company coordinates across subsidiaries. When corporate governance fails, every downstream brand partnership becomes collateral damage, a systemic risk that Western celebrity deals simply don't carry. When a Hollywood agency has a falling out with a studio, it doesn't freeze every endorsement deal the actor holds. In K-pop, it can. And for luxury risk departments, that distinction should be at the top of every contract review. Act 5. The Shift. February 2026. Milan. The Galleria Vittorio Emanuele II. Omega is hosting the opening gala of its first Winter Olympics hospitality venue. Two of the brand's ambassadors walk in together. One is George Clooney, the face of Omega since 2007, the embodiment of old-school Hollywood luxury. The other is Park Bo-gum, a Korean actor the brand signed 7 weeks earlier. They shake hands, they take photos. Clooney, charming as ever, jokes that standing next to Park Bo-gum makes him wanna retire. What happens next tells you everything about the shift. Park Bo-gum's appearance explodes across K-drama fan communities, Korean entertainment outlets, and Asian social media. Tens of thousands of posts within hours. Clooney's coverage? WWD runs a piece about his wife's dress. Same brand, same room, same evening, two completely different centuries of marketing. This is the gap the numbers have been pointing to all episode. And it's not really about who's more famous, it's about two fundamentally different economic models. The old model was aspirational. A Hollywood star generates passive admiration. You see Clooney in a magazine, you absorb the association, sophistication, success, a certain life. The brand controls the image. The cycle is slow, editorial, one-directional. It worked for decades. It built modern luxury. The new model is mobilizational. A K-pop idol or a Thai drama star doesn't just generate admiration. They activate an organized community that amplifies the brand message without being paid. Fans screenshot, repost, tag the brand, identify the products, share purchasing links, coordinate group buys, and turn a single Instagram post into a trending topic. Launch Metrics measured this. 77% of all ambassador media value now comes from what they call indirect echo. Not the ambassador's own post, but the thousands of fan-generated posts that follow it. And that's why Orm Konafat, with 2.4 million followers, outperforms Kylie Jenner with nearly 400 million. Jenner's audience scrolls past. Orm's audience mobilizes. The follower count measures reach. The engagement rate measures intent. And in the economics of luxury influence, intent is where the value lives. Here's what that mobilization looks like in practice. When V of BTS wore a Cartier Panthère necklace priced at $26,700 in July 2023, it sold out globally within minutes. Cartier's website crashed from the traffic, not because $26,700 customers suddenly materialized, but because an entire fandom descended on the site simultaneously. The emotional logic wasn't aspiration, I want to be like that celebrity. It was devotion. I want to be connected to this person. And devotion converts at rates that no ad campaign has ever matched. The old guard hasn't vanished, but it has been structurally demoted. Charlize Theron was the face of Dior's J'adore for 20 years. In 2024, Dior replaced her with Rihanna and moved Theron to high jewelry and skincare. Prestige, but no longer the flagship. Nicole Kidman was reactivated as a Chanel house ambassador under the new creative director Mathieu Blazy. Heritage signaling, not growth strategy. These are respected faces doing respected work, but the commercially dominant, digitally measurable ambassadorships now belong to Asian talent. Lefty's data on the fall 2025 season put the scale starkly. 74% of total Fashion Week media value came from Asia-Pacific profiles, up from 66% just one season earlier. And beneath the cultural shift, the domestic economics reinforce it. South Korea has the highest per capita luxury spending on earth, according to Morgan Stanley. Korea's top 3 luxury brands, Chanel, Louis Vuitton, and Hermès, posted combined Korean sales approaching 4.6 trillion won in 2024, roughly $3.3 billion, with Hermès surging over 20%. And just days ago, Chanel Korea disclosed something remarkable. 2025 revenue crossed 2 trillion won for the first time, about $1.5 billion from a single country, up 64% over 5 years. Operating profit jumped 25%. That's a brand raising prices 5 times in 1 year. Its classic maxi bag has doubled since 2020, and Korean consumers buying more, not less. But in 2025, the market also began to split. Ultra-premium brands like Hermès, Cartier, and Chanel continued to grow. Mid-tier luxury cooled sharply. Dior Korea card transaction fell nearly 25%. Burberry dropped over 22%. The K-pop effect, like the luxury market itself, may be splitting into winners and everyone else. And the metric itself deserves more scrutiny than it typically receives. Earned media value measures visibility, not revenue. 2 major analytics platforms, Lefty and Launchmetrics, produce wildly different numbers for the same events using different methodologies. Jungkook's Calvin Klein appearance at New York Fashion Week registered as $7.4 million on Lefty, but $30.4 million on Launchmetrics. Same person, same show, 4 times the difference. Every headline you read about ambassador value depends on which platform wrote the number, and most headlines don't tell you which one they're using. But no publicly available data translates any of this directly into sales revenue. The industry runs on a conviction, informed by data, sharpened by experience, but ultimately a bet on a generation's purchasing trajectory. Act 6, the bet. And yet, the brands that bet early are winning. In one sentence, Richemont, the Swiss conglomerate behind Cartier, just posted its strongest quarter in company history. Record sales of 6.4 billion euros in the 3 months ending December 2025, driven by a jewelry division where a third of every euro in revenue goes straight to profit. That result becomes extraordinary when you see the landscape around it. The global luxury goods market has been contracting, down from a peak of 369 billion euros in 2023 to 363 billion in 2024, according to Bain & Company. 50 million customers left in the 2 years through 2024 alone. LVMH, the world's largest luxury group, saw revenue fall 5% and net profit drop 13%. And in the middle of that downturn, Richemont, the house that bet earliest and most aggressively on Korean ambassadors, is posting records. The industry's response tells you everything. Louis Vuitton reportedly formed a dedicated K-pop task force at its Paris headquarters. In 2023, they closed 5 K-pop ambassador deals in a single year. The generational logic behind these bets is straightforward, but it has a consequence that most luxury executives haven't fully reckoned with. These ambassador relationships aren't endorsement deals. They are infrastructure. Cartier's entire media strategy in Asia now runs through a handful of Korean performers. If one of them retires, or switches brands, or gets caught up in a corporate dispute like NewJeans, the impact isn't a bad quarter, it's a structural hole. The brands that understood this earliest built redundancy. Multiple ambassadors, staggered contracts, diversified across generations. The brands that didn't are exposed. And the compounding is already visible. Lefty data shows Cartier's ambassador program generated 57% of the brand's total EMV in 2022, the highest share of any luxury house studied. When Cartier signed V and Jisoo, they weren't buying a campaign cycle, they were buying a decade. If BTS and BLACKPINK are still culturally relevant in 10 years, and today's fans are earning professional salaries, in 10 years, the return on a 2022 signing becomes exponential. That's why the smart contracts in this industry aren't seasonal campaigns. They are multi-year partnerships designed to compound over time like an investment thesis that matures with its audience. But the system comes with a form of accountability that luxury has never faced before. The industry hasn't just changed its ambassadors, it's changed its economic model from aspiration to mobilization. And mobilized audiences don't just buy, they audit. K-pop fan bases are not passive consumers, they are forensic analysts. When a news article about BTS's Fashion Week performance was promoted by management with one member's EMV conspicuously omitted, the highest individual figure, fans had compiled the missing data and turned the omission into a trending topic within hours. When a luxury brand signs a K-pop star, it acquires something more than an endorser. It acquires an audience that tracks every post, audits every product placement, and purchases accordingly. That intensity drives the extraordinary engagement rates. It also means every perceived slight will be dissected with the precision of an earnings call. For a luxury industry accustomed to controlling its own narrative, where a creative director's vision flows downward and the customer receives it, this is an inversion. The audience is now the analyst. The endorser is the signal. And the brand is being graded in real time by millions of people who care more about authenticity than any fashion critic ever did. The financial term for what the luxury industry is doing is investing in long duration assets. The human term is simpler. They're betting that the emotional bond between fan and idol, built through years of devotion, through military service, through solo debuts, through Fashion Week appearances, will eventually translate into purchasing loyalty. Not next quarter, not next year, over a decade. The early movers think that bet is already paying off. The rest are still reading the Kering results and wondering what went wrong. For a century, the luxury industry ran on a simple formula. Sign a Hollywood star, shoot a campaign in Provence, run it in Vogue, and let aspiration do the rest. That is over. What replaced it is faster, more powerful, and more precarious. And the brands that understood this shift 5 years ago are posting record quarters in the worst downturn since 2009. The brands that didn't are replacing creative directors and wondering where it went wrong. The luxury industry is making the biggest bet in its history that today's 22-year-old fan will be buying Cartier on a banker's salary in 2035. That the devotion built through years of following an idol will convert into purchasing loyalty when the income arrives. The early data says yes. The scale says unprecedented. And the question nobody in the boardroom wants to ask out loud, what happens if the next generation finds something else to be devoted to? That was Soft Power Asia, Episode 2, the $227 million seat. Next time, we go back to where it all started. September 17th, 1988, Seoul, South Korea. A military dictatorship stages the Olympic Games and accidentally launches the most successful soft power transformation in modern history. That's episode 3, from Seoul 88 to Squid Game. See you in about 2 weeks. And if you want to support this show, subscribe wherever you're listening. Leave a rating and share it with someone who thinks fashion is just about clothes. I'm Sims Lukwald. Stay curious, stay critical, and keep watching The Way.